Welcome to Alligator Preserves, everyone. I am your host, Laurel McHargue, and today I'm doing something new. Actually, Robert, aka Robert Eisenberg, and I have decided to do something new, and we're creating a new playlist, and it's going to be called Robert's Shorts, and he is going to perform some of the stories that you will find in his pretty amazing book. Robert, tell him the name of your book.
Oh, the title of the book is Why Men Are Suspicious of Yoga. Some funny stories and some not so funny. The story I'm going to tell today, I think is funny, and so has a lot of audiences. Maybe you won't. And that's this as well.
And so I'm going to ask you all. I interviewed Robert back in January. You can find that interview. I'll put a link to that as well. And yeah, we're gonna do these little shorts, and you're going to hear some of his short stories, and you're going to want to buy his book and his other book that I'll be interviewing him on shortly, called
Wham Bam, New York City in the roaring 60s. And they
yeah.
were roaring. Like, no, yeah, like nobody knows, yeah, unless you
Oh,
read the book.
right. All right. So Robert,
Yes.
remind people of where you're coming from today.
Yeah, I live in Lexington, Mass. I've lived in few different places in my life. I started off in Dorchester, Mass, and I lived there most of my years while I was trying to grow up, which was not easy. And then just before I think I left for the army, my dad took a place in Brookline, an apartment in Brookline, and I lived there for maybe a year. And then I moved to Manhattan, and I couldn't believe Manhattan. I thought I had moved to another world, and I thought I had another planet. And then my wife and I got married, and we lived in New York for a couple of years. We had a child in New York, and I'm going to tell a story about that and what happened and where we ended up, which was
all,
Newburyport. And
all
then
right. And we met Esther in the interview that I did with you a while ago. So again, listeners, go back and take a look at that. She's a lovely woman. She would have to be a lovely woman to be married to you for how many years?
you know how I checked that? I think of my daughter's age, 57.
Oh, Sarah, you shouldn't be listening to this. Don't share this with your friends because they're going to find something out about you today. Robert, tell us about this old house.
I couldn't hear that.
Tell us about this old house.
Oh, yeah, that's one of the stories in the book, Why Men Are Suspicious of Yoga. And recently I've told it a few times, and it's been well received, extremely so. And what had happened is my wife and I were trying to sell this old house in Newburyport. And a young man was pretty excited about it and kind of looked at us and said, by the way, he said, how old is the house? And I said, well, parts of it, a good part of it, go back to the 1600s, believe it or not. And it's true. And he looked again at us and he said, walked around the house and he said, may I ask, does a house have ghosts? I could not believe what my wife Esther said. She said, yes, the house does have ghosts, but if you treat them well, they'll be kind to you. In all of my life, I have never seen anybody get out of a chair so fast and run to a sky. You'd think that a match had been put on his behind.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, he was out of sight. Anyhow, I couldn't believe that she said it. It took about another 6 months, but finally somebody came to the house and same thing. My wife said the house has ghosts, and he said, ghosts? I'm not afraid of a ghost. Look at me. I'm taking on anything. I'm buying this house. And he said, they give me a hard time, I'll give them a hard time. And he bought the house.
Oh my
Anyhow,
goodness.
yeah. Anyhow, how did all this start? How did we get into a house this old? Neither one of us really that good with fixing things. And I had a full-time job. What happened was, I go back to 1968. My wife and I got married, and I was living in Manhattan. And she was going to move from her residence in Boston. She was a social worker at the time, and come to live with me in New York. Well, I was excited because I had lived in New York almost 10 years and I knew New York and I loved New York. New York has so much to offer. And I was going to be her usher. I was going to show her all the things I knew about the private little places that tourists never see, the great restaurants, and the Hungarian restaurants, the German restaurants, the Italian restaurants that the people, the tourists, never found out about. They were never written up. They were too small, but they were terrific. They were usually run by families and families who got to know you and couldn't wait for you to come in and they knew what you wanted.
Yeah.
So anyhow, I was excited. And she came to New York and I did exactly what I said. I started showing her around the city, and we were having uh, just the most glorious time. It was like one long honeymoon
Aw.
all in the city that I had grown to love. Well, I'm asleep one night, and she wakes me up around 6 in the morning with a little tap, and she says, "We need a shelf in the kitchen." And I said, "Why?" And she says, "To put things on." I said, "I've been in this apartment for quite a while." I said, "I've never needed a shelf." She said, "You don't understand kitchens as well as I do." She said, "We need a shelf in the kitchen." I said, "You don't understand New York." I said, "You want a shelf in the kitchen? Yeah, I don't know how you get one because, yeah, we get everything delivered and food and anything you want, but I don't think they deliver shelves in the kitchen." She said, "You go down to Third Avenue, there's a hardware store." I checked it out, she said. "You go in there and you tell them what you want. They'll tell you exactly how to put up the shelf, and you will be able to do it." I went to the place just as she instructed. They did instruct me as to how to put up the shelf, and 2 days later, there was a shelf in the kitchen to her applause. Well, a few months later, maybe 5 or 6 months later, she said, "We need a family." I said, "What?" I said, "We are a family. Look, we're on a second honeymoon here. We're having a wonderful time. What do you mean we need a family?" She said, "A family." She said, "You need a dog or a child. You choose," she said. I chose the
Oh,
dog.
oh.
Well, a year later, we had a dog and a child. About another 6 or 7 months passed, and she said, "We need another apartment. This one is too small." I said, "Do you want me to leave?"
Do you want me to leave?
For a second, she didn't answer, but she said, "Every time the dog barks, our baby wakes up and we don't have any room here." She said, "We have to move." I said, "Do you realize what we have here? We're living on a beautiful section on the east side." I said, "Look at how low our rent is. We have a doorman. We have a backyard with a barbecue. How could you ask for anything more?" She said, "I can. And I want another place that gives us more space." She said, "Let's look around Manhattan." I said, "Forget it." I said, "Do you realize we'll never match this rent? It'll never come close. The only chance we have is to go out to the burbs." She said, "Like where?" I said, "Well, first we can go out to New Jersey. And if that doesn't work, we can go out to Long Island." She said, "Well, why would we go to New Jersey? All Long Island." I said, "Well, first of all, they have the best diners known to man. Every kind of food you ever wanted or quelled for, they have. And it's good. Secondly, however people speak, whatever accent they have, our kids will have." So first thing we did was go to New Jersey, and we had a wonderful lunch. And she looked at me and she said, "Let's try another place." So we went to Long Island and we sat at a crowded restaurant, diner, and the food again was delicious. And we could hear everybody speaking. And she looked at me and she said, "Let's try something else." And on
I
the
love this woman. I love this woman.
and on the way back to Manhattan, she said, "We could." go back to Boston where we both came from. And, your dad would let us stay at his place while we shop for, a place to live. And we did exactly that. We went to my dad's place in Brookline, and we got every newspaper that would tell us about real estate that we could possibly find.
Yeah.
And one Sunday, she looks at me and she says, "Look at these places in Newburyport." This was just about 1970.
Yeah.
And look at the prices and look at how beautiful they are. Let's go up there, she said. I said, why not? Okay. We drove up to High Street in Newburyport, and it was just as the real pictures showed. It was beautiful and beautiful houses and lawns. And we she was coming out of Manhattan with this kind of space. It was really something to see. Let's
Yeah.
get a real. The next day, we got a person named Raymond Funchen, and he was something to see. He was tall, good looking, extremely well dressed with a vest. Even his shoes were shined. Everything about him was spectacular. And he's going to show us the city because he knew it. He knew Newburyport, but like the back of his hand, as he would say. And best of all, he had a New England accent. And he took us to one old house after another because he had asked about our budget. And they all were more or less something we could afford. And when we went into these houses and walked around, we could hear the houses say, "Please buy us. Please buy us." People come in here and they walk on the floors with no consideration. They stomp on the floors and they leave mud on the floors. And you look like such a young, lovely couple. Please
Oh.
buy us. So these people would come in and make messes of our house. And he took us to one old house after another. And finally, he said, "I have the house for you. It's the last house I'm going to take you to," he said. "And I've got this house with your name on it." Well, he took us to his house. And it was something to see. 6 fireplaces, one almost as tall as Esther's chin, because people used to cook in them.
Oh,
You know,
wow. That
yeah,
old.
yeah. Yeah, and the walls contained glass rather than fiberglass because that's what people insulated with.
Oh my gosh.
And we had beam ceilings, and you could just look at the wood. It was so beautiful, the flooring and everything. But I said to Raymond, "Who has lived in this house? It has a funny smell." He said, "Well, there have been cats here, and we can get them out in no time." I looked at my wife with a little despair, and he said, "But look at the beauty. Look at the patina in the wood. You won't find this in any other kind of house because this house goes back to the 1600s and the 1700s. Look at the things that will bring you, I mean, it's such a showplace. It's got your name on it." And he said, "I need your decision tomorrow morning on this house because somebody else is looking at it. And I have to
Oh,
leave now," he said. I looked at my wife and I'm about to say, "Let's go." And I saw her face. Oh my God. She had fallen in love with the house.
wow.
And I looked at her and I said, "Esther, I have a job. I don't want to lose the job." I said, "Do you realize how much work this house will entail?" I said, "It's beyond your imagination and mine." And she looked at me and she said, "We put up a shelf in New York."
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. That is so precious. Uh, That is that's amazing. And you ended up with that
Yeah,
house?
we lived there. It had a fire. Um, it had a fire because Newburyport was not the Newburyport that it is now. Newburyport got, restored incredibly, probably better than any place ever got restored, because one old house after another old house attracted people like myself,
Yeah.
and they came in probably a lot more handy than I ever was, and they made it probably one of the most beautiful cities in the country. But when we moved there, Newburyport was mostly the residents, particularly on the street we lived on, were very questionable.
Mm.
And one of the families, little, she wasn't a little girl, she was about 14, babysat for us, and she stole money
Mm.
and various other things. And her brother did worse things. And we think that they lit the house on fire because it was truant that day. And
Oh,
yeah,
wait,
somebody, yeah,
while you still owned it?
well, we owned it, but Esther was away she was at the Y with Sarah, who's, the yoga person now. And I was at my job. And I was in New York, actually. I got a call that the house had been lit on fire. And we restored it again. And we restored it again, even better. And we rented it out. We actually rented a place in Byfield and for about 2 years. And then we bought a house uh, back in Newburyport, and we restored that house. And then we moved to Lexington.
Well,
Yeah.
maybe the fire got rid of the cat odor. Oh
We
my
um,
goodness.
we ended up restoring about 5 houses in Newburyport, either through some of it through our handiwork, which wasn't much, and people we hired. But we did restore 5 houses.
That's amazing. I can't even imagine a house with six fireplaces. That is incredible. So do you remember what went on the shelf in that first apartment?
No, no idea.
Well, the bottom line is if you have a flat surface, things will go on it, right?
Yeah, I do remember when she said we need a dog and a child. What my child's like, and we got a Westie who I loved. I called him Honky because he was white. And a black lady saw we were in a hotel in Philadelphia for some reason or another, and I said, "Come on, Honky," and there was a black maid there, and she said, "Oh, you didn't do that."
Oh
Yeah,
my goodness.
yeah.
Wow. Robert, I love that story. I love your wife. Do you think did she really believe they were ghosts in the house you sold?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah?
We thought there were ghosts, and my kids are so whatever they are believe that there are ghosts in this house which we built.
All right. So what kind of evidence did you experience?
I don't know. She talked about it a lot. I didn't. I didn't think much of it. Because I was at work all day, and but I'm not sure why she said that, but she did believe there were ghosts in the house because
Yeah,
she's a very honest person, and she said to them, "Yeah, there are ghosts."
I think that's awesome. And I think it's amazing that some people would value having an old house with old spirits in it.
Yeah,
Yeah. I mean,
yeah,
life is interesting and even more interesting if you think that maybe there's something beyond. Yeah. Well, Robert, I love the story. And this is the first of your shorts. And listeners out there, you can order Robert's books. I'll have the links below. And come back next week when we'll have another story.
okay.
And you can think about that one. And is there anything else you want to tell our listeners about old houses?
Um, well, it was interesting in Newburyport, and I because when we went there, probably at that time, we were young, and probably somewhere near 300 or 400 other people came in, same kind of age, and so we all befriended one another and helped each other as far as where to go for this and where to go for that, what was the right hardware to store, what was the right thing to get, and most of them were probably a lot more handy than I was. Some of them even made a living doing it,
Yeah.
either restoring houses or carpentry. One guy, Jerry McIntosh, I think was his name. He rebuilt tables and chairs. He did some work for us. Incredible hands, and just great imagination how to fix things up. Uh, so it drew a lot of people like that who had this ability,
Yeah.
that wasn't necessarily uh, oh uh,
Maybe it was, maybe it
utilized.
wasn't their trade, but they just knew how to do
More than
things.
that, it was people didn't appreciate in the late 60s and 70s how important it was to have people who knew how to fix things.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
now it's suddenly becoming, taught at schools, and how important it is that people
Yeah.
can take things that need to be fixed and can do it with their own hands. And, it's become, a trade.
Yeah.
And, then it was kind of, the technical schools where I grew up were kind of frowned upon.
Yeah.
But,
They're
like
coming
many,
back. They're coming back.
yeah, because it's so important. And,
It is.
it's another kind of genius,
Yeah.
that people can look at things and know exactly what to do.
Yeah.
It's as much a genius as reading a book and explaining the book. It's just a different
Absolutely.
art. And
So
so,
I guess the message we leave everybody with today is renew, reuse, recycle. Yes?
yeah.
All
And
right.
fix, and know how to
Robert,
fix. Yeah. And,
thank you for this.
and
Thank you for
don't,
this. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
yeah, and don't look upon that as, inferior.
Right.
It's another kind of brains.
It is. Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for your story today. Listeners, come back next week and there'll be another one. Robert, take
But
care.